I want us all to really savor this rare moment of victory, because we don't get a lot of victories these days, and this was truly a people's victory. This tour of the Bay Area is being sponsored by over 40 organizations. And let me tell you, if you are at all cognizant of the internecine warfare, the brotherly Cain killed Abel, etc., of the left, you know how rare that is for all of these organizations to come together and say, we are celebrating Lynne Stewart's return. And indeed, it was more than organizations, although I always say being a member of the Guild for a lawyer is like having an insurance policy, because you know when the state comes down on you, there is an organization to turn to. But I will say that the effort that was made on behalf of individuals really is what turned the tide. As Jeff said, at the high water mark, I think there were probably close to 70,000 people who signed the petitions for my release on grounds of compassion. And you know, what's interesting to me about it is that it wasn't just the people who I've known for a lifetime, or who were my colleagues at the bar, or who were my relatives, or whatever, but each of them was compelled to tell everybody they knew, everybody on their lists, everybody on their email, to tell them, you know, I know this lawyer, or this lawyer represented me, or this lawyer I went to kindergarten with, and I think you ought to help her out too. Go to her website, read about her. It was that blossoming of support. It wasn't just the support of individual groups who signed on. So I am eternally grateful. It's more than grateful. I never would be here if it hadn't happened that way. And I must say that it is a victory for all of us, and we don't have a lot of victories these days. I want to say that the numbers are amazing. Well, the numbers are amazing, but those numbers broke the 74-year-old ex-con out of prison and brought her home to her children and her grandchildren. And now, because the best way to pay back for that is to, as they say in the community, to keep on keeping on. I am going to keep on fighting for the rights of people to come home to their families the way I came home to mine. I think Mumia is #1 on the hit parade here. Someone who should be restored by reason of his innocence to his family, to his community that needs him and loves him. You know, I said it when I first learned about Mumia, which was way back in the day, you know, I said, when you first hear about Mumia, you say to yourself, boy, this guy didn't get a fair shot. He didn't get a fair trial. But the more you read about Mumia, you realize this is an innocent man, wrongfully convicted. It's not just that he didn't get a fair shot, that too, but that in the instance of the beginning of this, he is an innocent man. And for everything else they want to say in this system, that is who must be protected over and over and over. Although, as Jeff said, everyone in the prison systems is a political prisoner. If you have a broad view of political, I can say that there's not one person I met in prison that wasn't there because they, by economic circumstance or by the forces of their own lives that made them into a criminal, they were there forced by a relentless, heartless society, a 99% and a 1%, that actually put them in prison. And maybe everybody doesn't go to prison, but far too many do, and far too many don't need to be there. So I am going to dedicate myself not only to, well, I'm particularly, of course, concerned with women prisoners. It is different, I'm sorry. It is not the same as just mass incarceration. The women in prison, they are beset by their lower status on the social scale. I hope no one will be affronted by my quoting Chairman Mao, but he assigned people a social category, and the bottom was women because they had other people on the ladder of oppression ahead of them. And I experienced in jail the heartbreak of women who were forced to leave their children, the heartbreak of women who never really got out of some kind of romantic notion that what they were doing by being a helpmate to a man who really didn't care about them and many times ended up giving them up to the government, that they really were oppressed many, many ways, and in that oppression they ended up in these terrible situations. A woman with 4 or 5 children who goes to jail because she worked for one of those bogus income tax places where they fill out the forms and they get the money and the people aren't real, they've made it up. But they came in there, they needed the money, they needed it for their kids. And maybe that doesn't justify everything, but I don't know why it should justify everything for guys that pollute our skies, for guys that kill our land, and not for poor women who are on the street and desperate to have enough money to take care of their children. Of course, my other great cause is the political prisoners, many of whom have been in there for 30 and 40 years, since back in the day, as we say, back in the day when there were panthers roaming the streets and protecting the community. And you know, we hear a lot about the cop killers and they're in there for, killed 2 cops up in Harlem, killed the cops in Atlanta, Jamil Al-Amin, he was in Mississippi at a rest stop, killed a cop, as if somehow that particular crime exonerates everything else. And when I say exonerates, I mean means that nothing else means anything, because the cop in itself, that blue uniform, obviates everything else. And I'm not saying any murder can be made justifiable, but why don't we have special laws for people who kill Nobel Prize laureates, cancer research doctors, people who matter in the society as much as a policeman? If you're going to differentiate and say, well, this is a more heinous crime than killing a 7-year-old on the street in Brooklyn, then you have to differentiate in the sense that it has some meaningful, not just to say, because it's a cop, we have to keep these men in jail forever. And I tell you, if you please, go to the Jericho listing of political prisoners. When I came home from jail, Ralph said, 1 out, 149 more to go. I believe that if these are and were in their day, and many of them were very, very young when they went to jail, 19, 20, so they didn't have an opportunity to present to a court, as I did, a lifetime of service and good works. But they have inside the jail done that service and good works. I'm talking about ex-Panthers, I'm talking about ex-SDS, I'm talking about the people who were in jail for political motivations, not because they had agreed they could not be satisfied any other way. So I just want to say that I feel it's incumbent upon us to restore mostly these men. There are a few women also, but by and large the women have managed to get out, even though they were involved in many ways more so than the men. And of course Asada, who managed to be exiled, and quote, to Cuba, and who was she was the heart of the Black Liberation Army. She and Marilyn Buck, the two women who were the heart of the Black Liberation Army. As I said, that is one facet of what I really want to do for the rest of my life, and in a minute I'll tell you how we're calculating that. But before I do that, I just want to read Methuselah Shakur, who was a doctor in Harlem and who had actually perfected an acupuncture treatment for heroin addicts, which had been adopted at a number of clinics in Harlem and in the Bronx. He was arrested in connection with the Brinks holdup. And the Brinks holdup, of course, took place in slightly upstate New York and resulted in the death of 3 policemen. He was not on the scene, but he was alleged to be part of the conspiracy. And you know, you have to say to yourself, the people who were on the scene, you know, self-defense is a time-honored defense. It's a defense that you may use in defense of others. You may defend on behalf of community. And so many of these men were doing just that. And we noted that the statistics showed that in the years that the Panthers were active, that the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, was active, the number of young people or people shot down by the police decreased radically. I mean, we talk about deterrence. That was the deterrent. And you may not, and I don't want to offend any pacifist here, everybody has their own methodology and way of seeing change come back, but please entertain the notion that these men were acting in defense of a community under siege at that time. We are talking about the 60s. I want to read you part of a letter that Methuselah Shakur, the doctor, the acupuncture doctor, wrote to Ralph from jail, and which I thought I had lost because in the rush to go to jail and put everything away, and this was in my bag, and that was, where did it go? But I will happily can say I found this letter again. I just want to read you the last paragraph. So many of our freedom fighters are seemingly lost from the present generation. It's so sad, more so because they are lost without light to point the way. These brave souls who wait for the love of the people to free them is a demonstration of faith that religion could only imagine. Yeah. These brave souls who wait for us to liberate them. I am going to give the rest of my life to these brave souls as a test of their faith in me. Now, many of you greeted me today when I got here with a big hug and you look wonderful. And I do, and I am wonderful. But I know there's a subscript. And the subscript is, you're supposed to be dying of cancer. Why do you look so wonderful? Well, the fact of the matter is, as I said in so many petitions, as I said in my own requests to Holder, to Obama, to the chairman of the Bureau of Prisons, I need to go home to be with my family. And I mean family, I mean extended family in San Jose, in San Francisco, in New York, and Brooklyn. I need to go home to be with my family, my friends, and I need to get medical care that is cutting edge. Fort Worth is a very, well, it's not such a nice place. I was going to say it's very nice. It's not a very nice place. It's very hot in the summer and very dry and dusty in the winter, but nonetheless, I needed to go home, and that was what I said. Well, of course, nothing ever runs smoothly. I no sooner got home than I was told I no longer was covered by Medicare, even though I'm 74 years old, because somewhere during the years that passed, the bureaucracy got me. They sent out a notice that I had to renew my Medicare. And because who got the notice? The notice went to my last known address. I never saw a notice. I never got a notice. So they said, well, now you have to wait till next July to become enrolled again in the Part B of Medicare, which pays your doctors. And here I have Sloan Kettering, the cutting edge, the best of the best, waiting to take care of me. We have got a gold card, and that gold card is our daughter, who is a doctor, and she had made all these arrangements for me. But we couldn't take advantage of it because we had no way, we had no medical coverage, no way to pay them. So we spent the next 2 months getting on Medicaid, and we got on Medicaid by basically haranguing them by saying, they'd say, well, we'll submit this, but it might take a couple of weeks. And we'd say, we don't have a couple of weeks. She's dying of cancer, Ralph would say. And eventually, by mid-March, now remember I got out the 1st of January, we finally got Medicaid, and we have since then, hopefully, looked forward to having Medicare in July. But this doesn't solve our problems, because I don't know how many of you know, but of course, they only cover a portion of your medical. They don't cover all of it. And cancer treatment is super expensive. And to live in New York, and I don't know how many of you have been there lately, but you know, to go to the doctors and park the car is maybe a $25 to a $40 parking fee. It's not about that. It really is about paying these basic things so we can drive to an appointment and not have to take an ambulette, or which will take you there and then bring you back, but won't go anywhere else. Anyway, not to belabor the point, there are lots of expenses when you're sick, and I have gotten steadily better. If they didn't tell me I had cancer, I really wouldn't know I did. Well, I haven't. The latest tests show that it's just as it was when the prognosis was made, and that actually there's a liver involvement now as well. So I am bona fide, but thank goodness, like so many others, and I think everybody in the room may know someone who beat cancer. It's apparently so much, and that is one of the ways they treat it now, is to enable you to make your own decisions about how you want to go about dealing with it. Do you want, if you want to stay in bed every day for the next 2 years and die suddenly, you can do that. But if you want to get up and go about your business, then you should do that. If you think you can, you should do it. And part of that, here I am in California, 6-hour jet line trip. Here I am, doctors approved it, probation department approved it. But I do have to give you a footnote on the probation. I do have a 5-year probation I must serve. And you know, when I was in jail, the women would say, Lynne, what are you here for? And I would say, I'm here because I was too good a lawyer. And that was part of it. And actually my clients from the hoods of New York would say, you know, Miss Stewart, they didn't come after you because of that old Muslim man. They came after you because you were too good defending us. I did have some stunning victories. Jeff wanted me to talk about Larry Davis, a young man from the Bronx who, when confronted by a lethal force of police, I'm talking about 30 police who came to arrest him, he managed to escape their initial volley of gunfire and fight back, got them out of this small tenement apartment and escaped. And later, at the good works of myself and Bill Kunstler, we managed to have him acquitted by reason of self-defense. If they don't like cop killers, boy, do they hate young black men from the hood who can get, quote, off on an attempted murder of the police charge. The mayor of New York said, I didn't know you could use self-defense against the police. To which we responded in time. if you can't use against the police, we are doomed in the neighborhood. We are doomed. But at any rate, so there is some truth in the fact that yes, they resented me because I was too good a lawyer for people that they didn't expect to have a good lawyer, that they didn't expect to get up there and fight for their clients, and that included the blind sheikh. So anyway, here we are. I want to mention one other case. This is a new case because it just really started last week, Sunday. A minister in Benton Harbor, Michigan, by the name of Pinckney, a black minister. Benton Harbor, Michigan is a small town on the shores of Lake Michigan, directly across, mostly from Chicago. It's a company town owned by Whirlpool. Whirlpool had a big factory there, and they had wrested all sorts of concessions, mostly through connivance and bribery, some legally, but they had canals dug for them, they didn't pay water bills, and the town, which is mainly, well, is in some part a black town, I'm not sure what the percentages are, but Reverend Pinckney, and that's who I'm talking about, certainly was the person who led the black part of town. And he did, years ago, lead them in struggles which resulted in Whirlpool not being able to take some of the best land, the most beautiful land overlooking Lake Michigan for a golf course, taking the high school away from the property. And he challenged the people in office, and when he did that, he ended up going to jail because at his sentencing hearing, he dared to quote this reverend of 20 years, that radical book that you shouldn't have in a courtroom. He quoted from Deuteronomy, and he said that when judges are corrupt, the nation fails. And they decided that was contempt of court. The judge was being insulted, and they locked him up. And he was in jail for at least 2 to 3 years before someone was able to get him out of jail. And he came out of jail, he was the same fighting spirit. He continued his assault against Whirlpool in Michigan manner of these days. They appointed a city manager, someone not elected by the people, no connection. What did Reverend Pinckney do? He immediately started a recall. A recall of this unelected official who was just continuing the problem with Whirlpool. Whirlpool changed its name, lost money on the stock exchange. The Reverend continued. He had a recall petition, and last week he got arrested because they said voter fraud. That 2 of the signatures on this is the most we can get out of the lawyers, the 2 of the signatures on the petitions had dates that weren't in the same handwriting, and they accused Pinckney of substituting those dates. Now, in good old corrupt New York, where there are millions of petitions signed for office, when something is questioned by the opposing and saying, this doesn't look right, this is a different handwriting, a different pen than that, they just cross the name off. They don't arrest somebody and accuse them of making the changes. But Reverend Pinckney was not only accused of 5 felonies, we understand, he also was placed under the most, to me, almost unbelievable conditions of bail release. He is confined to his home, and he is not permitted to be on the internet. He is not permitted to do email. He has a very successful radio show on the internet. Every Sunday he's on for 2 hours. He has people, Ralph is one of his guests, and there are others as well that comment on what's happening these days. Last week, his daughter had to run the program because he's not permitted to speak. I don't know about you, but to me, this conjures up all those images of Bobby Seale, gagged in the courtroom at the Chicago 7 trial, not allowed to speak, not allowed to move. We are supposedly a country of laws. You are innocent till you have been convicted. And here is Reverend Pinckney has got he's silenced by the authorities that he has opposed so valiantly. So tell me again, Ralph, what is the website?
The website is
You're having a senior moment too, because it happens, you know.
VHBentonHarborBanco.org. VHBANC.org.
And please go there, take a look. Even if you don't have time to do it anyway. Because this is a case everybody should know. But the only way there's going to be justice if there is that wonderful spotlight of our concerted effort, just as you did for me, just as I hope you will do in days to come when other political prisoners ask for your help. That is what works, because it makes the government more afraid of not doing it than of not helping, but of doing the right thing. So that is what we must do, and keep in mind Reverend Pinckney, Benton Harbor, Michigan. I also, in closing, I want to say that, let me see, hang on. I am a great lover of poetry. I like to read poetry at events such as this because to me, poetry that raises the hair on the back of my neck is something that inspires all of us. And inspires us in a different way than just the spoken word as such. So I'm going to read to you one of my favorite poems. It's by someone you may not have heard of. His name is Tony Hoagland. And last night in San Francisco, I left all the poetry home. I forgot to bring any of it. So you are being treated to poetry tonight where other people missed out last night, but they forgave me. Okay, the name of this poem is Hard Rain, and it's by a poet named Tony Hoagland, Hoagland. After I heard It's a Hard Rains Are Gonna Fall, played softly by an accordion quartet through the ceiling speakers at the Springdale shopping mall, I understand that there's nothing we cannot pluck the stinger from. Nothing we can't turn into a soft drink flavor or a t-shirt. Even serenity can become something horrible if you make a commercial about it using smiling, white-haired people quoting Thoreau to sell retirement homes. Retirement homes in the Everglades, where the swamp has been drained and bulldozed, and a 19-hole golf course with electrified alligator barriers. Can't keep beating yourself up, Billy, I heard the therapist say on television to the teenage murderer. About all those people you killed, you just have to be the best person you can be, one day at a time. And everybody in the audience claps and weeps a little because the level of deep feeling has been touched. And they want to believe that the power of forgiveness is greater than the power of consequence or history. Dear Abby, my father is a businessman who travels. Each time he returns from one of his trips, his shoes and trousers are covered with blood. But he never forgets to bring me a nice present. Should I say something? Signed, America. I used to think I was not part of this, that I could mind my own business and get along. But that was just another song that had been taught to me since birth, whose words I was humming under my breath as I was walking through the Springdale Mall. Thank you all.